Hello, this is Nestor Torres, and welcome to Alternate Avenues in Jazz. I am so delighted to be here. Gail, boy, she's been doing such an amazing work with and on behalf of the jazz community for so long. And I truly consider it a true honor and pleasure to be on this platform today. And so it is, we're going to spend some time. I look forward to getting to tell you a bit about me. Feel free to send us any questions or comments that you'd like as we spend this time together. Um, you know, when it comes to jazz music, I'm considering that my music is jazz. But at the beginning, as a young fellow, I never really thought of my going into the genre. Actually, I had no sense of direction other than I wanted to be a musician. You see, my father was a musician, and I grew up around, instruments, trumpets, trombones, pianos, saxophones, bass, and the drums. And that's what I started playing since I was a child. Santa Claus actually brought me a small professional set when I was 5 years old. And I have two cousins who started playing drums as well. But when the time came to enter middle school in Puerto Rico, which is where I'm from, they have in certain cities what is called escuelas libre de música, or free music schools. And at that time, you would go half of the day to the regular school and half the day to music school. And so my cousins wanted to go. And I said, well, gee, I want to go. But when the time came to choose what instrument I wanted to learn, I just didn't see myself studying drums, academically, or to learn music or drums as music. I wanted melodies, I wanted, harmonies and so on. And so what instrument to play? As I said, because I was surrounded by so many instruments, nothing really resonated. And then I lifted my eyes from the paper, from the application form, looked at the blackboard, and saw the photograph of a flute. And so, that's different. Oh, I'll try that. And so that's how it was that I got to, play the flute. But back into the jazz journey for me, my first experience about jazz once again came through my father, because he was listening to Dave Brubeck, he was listening to Stan Getz, a bit broader, Mongo Santa Maria, on the Latin jazz side, Sergio Mendes, and so other jazz artists. And in fact, when I told him I wanted to play the flute, he was not very impressed, by the way, because he thought that if I was going to make a living as a musician, I was going to have to learn saxophone and clarinet in addition to the flute. But he introduced me to Herbie Mann, and there it went. As I continue to listen to the music, of course, Miles, Bird, Coltrane, and the one that came to be my idol, Hubert Laws. And it's funny the way that I came about really discovering or rediscovering Hubert was in that, I had heard him play in Mongo Santa Maria's records. And I never forget that there's this record of Mongo Santa Maria Explodes at the Village Gate. And the most exquisite, perfect piccolo solo ever recorded is in that album, in the song Afro Blue. And it is Hubert Laws. And I had heard it and I had enjoyed it, but I was very young and I wasn't really paying attention. This is before I started playing the flute. And so it was that for my high school graduation present, my mother sent me to Berklee School of Music for the summer. Now, mind you, this is many, many, many years ago. And so there was in Boston on Mass Avenue this great record store. My allotment was $25 a week. And trust me, I spent all my money on records. At the beginning, I bought every possible Herbie Mann record I could find. But then one day I was going to the store with a couple of, fellow students. And somehow the subject came about as to what we were going to be buying, what we were looking for. And I said, oh, of course, Herbie Mann. They started laughing at me. I said, what are you laughing? So, well, haven't you heard of Hubert Laws? I said, well, I think so. And so I looked for his records. I remember the first records of Hubert that I got were Live at Carnegie Hall, Morning Star, and Syrinx, I think, or I forget, the Rite of Spring. That's the title of the record that included classical, compositions, and also Fire and Rain. I'm telling you, I bought like 4 or 5 records from the outside, from the outset of Hubert's. This is from the CTI label, and my life changed forever when I heard Hubert, and so uh, yeah, very fond memories I have of that. That's how I spent all of my money. I was eating an awful lot of peanut butter and jelly because I was spending all my money on recordings at that time. So um, from there, though, came back to Puerto Rico, and I went to the university, Inter-American University, and I was focusing on the flute. And I played saxophone for a few years, and then my family relocated to New York City. I had such great fortune at the time that it was doing the the pyramid, the highest point of of salsa music popularity really was. I mean, disco was beginning to come in, but salsa was still very, very prominent. And within the genre of salsa, there's a specific style of Cuban music called charanga. And whereas salsa music, you would hear horns, trumpets, trombones, some saxophones, heavy duty rhythm section, and singers, and so on. Charanga music is this strings playing rhythmic patterns, as well as some background melodies, and the flute as a protagonist. Where the flute is constantly playing around the melody that the singers sing, and then when the groove comes on, or the montun as they call it, the flute then improvises at will, and it is the focus of the music to get people to dance. Um, and so it was that. Whereas I was already, as I mentioned, I was familiar with Hubert and Miles and Train and Bird and so on. My real training improvising before I delved deeper into jazz was actually playing Cuban music, charanga music. And so that's why, I think that I'm very grateful for that influence, because my music, my style, my flute playing style is very melodic, is very rhythmic, and it definitely comes from that kind of influence. And I've been able to translate that into the other different genres, the genres within the jazz genre, like Latin jazz, pop Latin jazz, or smooth jazz, jazz fusion. Uh, I have also done something that Hubert did was combining, bringing classical pieces, or from the flute repertoire, orchestral repertoire, and bringing to him his own style. I have done some of that, although nowhere near as much. And so that's my relationship with how I started actually improvising. Now I will say that when we talk about jazz, it's such a broad term today. um, for me, as I mentioned earlier, I did not intentionally decide to delve into jazz music, because I have tremendous respect for it, and the harmonic intricacies and so on are, at the time, as I was very young, I confess, a little bit intimidating, and I was always gravitating towards a melodic, rhythmic, lyrical approach to the music. So it was not until later that I developed, a congruency, you know, in how it is that beyond the Latin style, then I would, delve more into what we know as jazz. But as I mentioned, Latin jazz, Brazilian jazz, so many other different kinds of music, that are under the umbrella of jazz, which actually, the way it's a personal observation, by virtue of the fact that my music is instrumental and that there is a great deal of improvisation, therefore it is called jazz. And so we could get into a bit of a deeper, conversation as to how do you really define jazz. But I guess that, jazz is about freedom of expression. and so on. I see that we have some folks that wanted to either say hello or that have some questions. Let's see. Michelle Taylor. I remember you so very, very, very well. Um, Michelle Taylor is a real pioneer in the recording industry. She was an executive at the record label, my first jazz record label, their forecast. At the time, it was Polygram. And my very first two jazz records, Morning Ride and Dance to the Phoenix, she was in one way or another involved, and I'm delighted that you're there, Michelle. If there's anything you'd like to ask, anything you want to share or remind me of, please do let me know. And Gail, of course, thank you so much for having me. Okay, so um, Mark Morganelli, thank you so much for being here. And wow, you were at the Village Gate. Oh my gosh, with Mongo Santa Maria, with some nights with Mario Bauza. Now, Mario Bauza, for those of you who are not familiar, is really the sound behind Machito. And talk about Latin jazz. I have to give it a shout out to a fellow musician. He's a bass player, bass player, Carlo Torres de la Rosa. He's doing his PhD dissertation on a bass player by the name of Bobby Rodriguez. And Bobby was one of the pioneers in Latin jazz. I mentioned him because when Mark talks about Mario Bauza, it was Mario Bauza, the pioneer, artist, musician that combined Afro-Cuban music with jazz. And he did so with Dizzy Gillespie, a percussionist called Chano Pozo, and Bobby Rodriguez was the bass player at the time. So indeed, very happy to see all of you. Let's see. Michelle, I hope that you're there still. What are you doing these days? You see, this transformation, the being in the music industry requires such transformation. I'm adapting to the times. It's something that is so crucial. Um, what I wanted to share something with you because there you are, Michelle. I remember let's talking with Michelle Taylor. There was a time in the early 90s. You'll appreciate this story. I mentioned jazz recordings because prior to my playing jazz and prior to my relationship with Polygram and their forecast label, I was actually very fortunate to do 4 records as a soloist in the charanga genre, as I mentioned. The first 2 were in Colombia, in the country of Colombia. One recorded in Medellin, Colombia, the other one in Bogota. And then in New York City, I did a record called Afro Charanga Volume 2. And later on, No Me Provoques. Those last 2 records I mentioned, I was able to obtain the masters, and there's a compilation CD or production called Mis Canciones Primeras. And, that's where you really get to hear where I come from the whole Cuban music tradition. And so more about the Cuban tradition in a moment. But I wanted to share this with Michelle and all of you about the ironies and things about life, how it can be so funny. There are 2 things. Whereas most artists that make music are seeking to be, played on the radio, I was very blessed in South Florida. I was in New York for 6 years, then I came here with a Latin band by the name of Hansel and Raul. And I was really restless. I wanted to do different things, more things, and I just went on my own, not knowing what I was doing. And so little by little, playing a park here, a restaurant there, I was able to develop a following, a grassroots following. So much so that the executive of the jazz radio station at the time came to me and said, some event at a shopping mall, I think. And he said, Nestor, please give us a record. And so it really took me by surprise because usually the musician is knocking on doors asking for his music to be played. This record executive is asking me to provide music. So one thing led to the other. We were able to find someone to fund a record. I was ready to do an independent production because we had not been successfully getting signed. And then when this record was done, an entertainment lawyer by the name of David Berkes and said, I want to hear what you have. And so we sent him the cassette, and he was excited, and he sent it to Polygram, to Verve Forecast, Richard Seidel, right? And so he sent them the cassette, or so he thought. It turns out that for whatever reason, he ended up sending an empty cassette box, which, of course, I guess it created that much more curiosity for the folks on the label to hear it. And I guess the rest is history. But so it is, and I'm very grateful to Richard, to Michelle, later on, Ulyss Cathy, so many people at the very beginning of my career in jazz that were so very supportive. As I know that Gail is so supportive of the artist, So anyway, I just got a question about my days, and somebody asked if there's an advice that I received early on as a young musician from an elder. And yes, I did. I remember that I've received much advice and encouragement. James Moody was an amazing, amazing mentor. We met very briefly, but he was so warm and so open. And can you believe it? He was asking me for lessons in flute. And he then, of course, proceeded to give me amazing lessons in jazz. But the very first and transformative advice I received from a musician was from Tito Puente. My father had moved to New York sometime earlier, a year earlier. And so that he could open the way for the family to come follow suit. So the Christmas before we all moved to New York, my cousins and I went to visit him. And so he took us after he was playing with Candido Camero, with Candido, at a club, Chateau Madrid on 48th and Lexington. And so we went to a Club Cabo Rojeño up on 138th and Broadway to listen a las to Machito and Tito Puente. Oh my gosh, imagine those teenagers from the island, to be able to listen to these legends. And so because my father knew Tito from different encounters in Puerto Rico, and my great aunt, Ruth Fernandez, was also a very well-known artist, and she knew Tito as well. There was a bit of a comfort level in which I dared to ask if I could sit in, and I sat in Tito's with Tito's band for the last song. I have no idea what the song was. I have no idea what I was doing. In any case, at the end of the song, they had finished for the night. Tito summons me to his table, and he says to me, "That music, you got to play at an octave higher, the third octave. Esa música se toca en octava de arriba." What he meant to say that everything in Cuban music needs to be played, or Latin music, a third octave. I think I'm going to show you. Actually, I have the flute here. I wasn't thinking about it. But that was the first advice that I received. And it really changed me, because at the time I was also, shortly thereafter, when we finally moved to New York, I was studying at Mannes School of Music during the day and then playing Latin clubs at night. And because of what Tito had told me, I really understood, and I realized that I needed to play in the very high register of the flute. And so what I did at the time, it was whatever exercises and whatever lessons, I was receiving or learning at Mannes, I would apply that, especially the daily exercises. I applied that to I took it up a third octave. So you all know what I'm talking about, and probably most of you do, but I'm inspired to share it with you. This is the register, the regular register of the flute. Right? But what Tito was talking about was that's, unless you practice a lot, it can be pretty challenging to play in that register. But I owe it to Tito that I was able to develop, my sound at that level during that time. Oh, wow. You all inspire me to share so many things, Jazz Judy is listening, and I hope that you do make it to Florida. We're actually going to be on March 13th. We're going to be at the Boca Arts Festival. And any other activities, please go to NestorTorres.com. You can also go to, I'm at IG Nestor Torres Official, and Twitter at Nestor Torres. And Facebook, you'll find the Nestor Torres artist page. Now, I am very, very excited to share some news, and that's why we had asked Gail if she would let us spend some time with you, and that is that throughout the years, I have been very blessed in being able to record my music, very different, my own unique style of music, as well as hardcore Latin jazz. Our latest or most recent CD was entitled, or is entitled, Jazz with Traditions, in which we go, pay homage to the jazz flutists that have come before me, Hubert Laws, Herbie Mann, Yusef Lateef, Frank West, Eric Dolphy, Razan Roland Kirk, including a fellow by the name of Essie Morales, one of the pioneers in Latin jazz flute. And we have also done some classical recordings. But for a number of years, we were very exciting and very fortunate to do some music in what would be called a genre of smooth jazz. I call it music. I call it jazz. Melodic and rhythmically engaging music. And so I wanted to go back to that sound and adding a little bit of a tinge of our own Latin feel to it. And so we were getting ready to do that. And then a very dear friend and mentor and patron of the arts, Willie Payne from San Diego, he suddenly passed away. He was bigger than life, and he was so instrumental in, co-producing jazz festivals, helping young musicians, including myself. And the joie de vivre, him and his wife, Kathy, was just so delightful and so inspiring. And so when we lost him, I was completely taken aback. I was distraught and grieving. And yet there was something that I could not bring myself to be sad for long, because Willie Payne was about joy. It was about smiles. It was about living life to the fullest. And there was a sense of such appreciation and gratitude that I felt for him, for his life, for his example, for his legacy. And so it was that I decided that I wanted to celebrate him by writing and producing and creating a song that would do just that, to thank him. And so it is that as of January 17th, we're very proud to have released our single, Thank You, Willie. It's available on the all the platforms, music platforms. So we really hope that you check it out. And we are so happy and humbled because everyone is asking when the album is coming out. And indeed, we're working on the album. So stay tuned for that. In the meantime, check out, Thank You, Willie, on all the streaming platforms, and it's available everywhere. Let's take a look and see what other some greetings and questions we're having here. Mark is asking us about Dave Valentine. Of course, Dave and I it's very misty because Dave and I share so many things. For example, Dave was born on April 28th. I am born April 25th. I was born and raised in Mayagüez. Although Dave was born and raised in New York, his grandfather is from my hometown of Mayagüez. And both of our grandfathers, they knew each other. It was a remarkable connection. And in fact, when David, before he launching his solo career, he played in this Latin group called Conjunto Libre. When Dave departed the group to do his thing, I came on board and I joined the group. And then when I left, then Dave, in between some of his own engagements, would play with Conjunto Libre. And I'll tell you one more thing that nobody knows. I don't really talk about it. And I think this is the second time I'm going to be bringing it up. Is that Dave, as part of that association with Conjunto Libre, there's a song by a Puerto Rican composer by the name of Pedro Flores called Obsesión. And so it goes like this. And so I used to play that from when I was studying as a flutist in Puerto Rico. When I come to New York and I was performing with Conjunto Libre, we were performing, we would, introduce a song to them and we perform Obsesión. After I left the band, I guess that Dave took it on. He made it his own. And in the Two Amigos record, he recorded it and it became his. So there is that, real constant connection with Dave, but his legacy is a great one. He certainly left us way too soon. So my love to him, and thank you for asking. We have a couple more minutes. If there's any of you who would like to ask anything or any other comments, what a delight it is to be able to join you today. And thank you once again. And I also want to thank, Scott Thompson, and so many others that have been instrumental in spreading the word of Thank You, Willie, and of Nestor Torres coming back into the genre. It's just really a wonderful thing to be able to be making music for all of you. Maybe I should play a little bit of it, huh? Let me see. Thank you, Willie. Thank you very much. Thank you so very much. Thank you so very much. Well, time goes quite quickly when you're having a great time. And I believe we do have a couple more minutes. But we are living in very challenging times. And, we always have a choice as to whether we lament or acknowledge the darkness of the times, or we can all choose to be at least one beam of light that fights or becomes a contrast to that darkness. And so as artists, I believe is our mission or an opportunity for us to do that through our music. And that has been my intention with my work and through my songs. So inviting you once again to stay tuned to All Things Nestor Torres. And join us on Facebook, like us on Facebook, join us and, listen to us on Spotify and so on. Especially with Thank You, Willie. You can check out so much more of my music. We have very different styles of music. And so, at one point in the industry, before flute was popular in the genre of smooth jazz, and I have to give a shout out to Kim Scott, to Althea Renee, to Zanjek, to so many others, Najee, other great instrumentalists that are, bringing the flute into jazz again is a wonderful thing. I was told that many years ago that that flute did not sell or belong in jazz. And yet it's not about the instrument, it's about the artist and intentions of the voice. The voice is the instrument. That's what it is. Our instrument is the voice, and my voice is a flute. And I'm so deeply grateful that you have chosen to spend this time with me. I'm so grateful to be able to mix it for you. And so until the next time, I really thank you so very, very much. Thank you, Gail. Thank you to all of you who have tuned in to be with us and join us. Until the next time.